There are only 14 mountains on Earth which rise above 8,000 meters, but only one towers above the rest, Mount Everest. Its summit provides unparalleled views, but only to those who conquer its unforgiving brutality. A brutality which has claimed the lives of over 300 people. From the beginning of your ascent over the constantly shifting Kuhumbu Icefall, where one wrong step can be fatal, to the oxygen-starved air which causes your brain to second-guess itself, or the hurricane-force winds which can appear without warning, and then there are its catastrophic avalanches which have caused such destruction in the past that the mountain had to be closed for the rest of the year. Everest can claim its next victim at any time. But even then, there are dangers which most people are unaware of, such as landing at the world's deadliest airport before you even begin your trek towards the mountain. To truly understand why Mount Everest is the world's tallest death trap, we need to discuss its remote location, its dizzying altitude, the unpredictable weather, the climbing difficulty itself, and finally, its deadly avalanches. Mount Everest is located on the border of Nepal and the Tibet Autonomous Region of China in the Himalayas of southern Asia. Its remote location is one of its deadliest traits. Before one even attempts to climb the mountain, they need to first reach base camp, of which Everest has two: South Base Camp on the Nepal side and North Base Camp in Tibet. Most people operate from the South Base Camp due to the ease of access and the greater chance of a permit being granted. But how do you get there? The first step for most people would be making it to Kathmandu, the most populous city in Nepal. From here, you take a flight to Lukla, which only takes about 30 minutes. However, this is where the first bit of real danger comes, weeks before your summit push. Lukla Airport, also known as the Tenzing Hilary Airport, has a reputation of being the most dangerous in the world. It's surrounded by steep, mountainous terrain. On one end of the runway is a wall, and on the other, a steep drop into the valley below. It sits at an altitude of 2,486 meters, meaning the air density is considerably lower than at sea level, which affects the power an aircraft engine can generate, reducing its lift. This lack of air resistance also makes it more challenging for a landing plane to slow down. So it's a good job it has a long runway, right? Well, runways at many of the world's international airports are more than 10,000 feet long. The runway at Lukla Airport is just 1,729 feet. It's extremely short. So short that it's sloped at a gradient of almost 12% to help slow the planes down. To make matters worse, there is little opportunity for a missed approach because of the surrounding mountains, meaning that there are no go-around procedures. On top of all of that, the weather in the region can be extremely unpredictable, as we'll find out in more detail later. But in terms of Lukla Airport, it means flights are often cancelled. There have been times where thousands of tourists have been stranded there, waiting for a flight for more than a week. October 2008 saw the airport's worst disaster as a plane crashed on its final approach and caught fire, killing 18 passengers and crew. The aircraft's captain was the only survivor. Evidently, this airport adds a danger to your climb which many people may not consider, but it's saving you vital time and energy which you will need for the climb. For the sake of this video, however, let's assume your flight went ahead safe and sound as scheduled. Now you must trek roughly 60 kilometers to Everest. The trail passes through Sherpa villages such as Namche Bazaar, Nepal's famous rhododendron forests, and you're trekked with stunning Himalayan landscapes. There will be views of Everest along the way, reminding you of what's to come. There are also tea houses which provide basic lodging and meals. Bad weather can make this trek more dangerous, but most fit people should be able to complete it without proper planning. About 40,000 people do it each year. The time it takes varies on your pace and the amount of acclimatization days you have, but it's roughly 7 to 14 days. The acclimatization days I just mentioned are vital because the altitude of Everest is one of the reasons some people don't make it back down. Mount Everest stands taller than everything else with an altitude of 29,032 feet, or 8,849 meters. Being this tall means that to reach its summit, you enter the death zone. This refers to 8,000 meters and higher, where the human body cannot function properly for an extended time span. Although air contains 21% oxygen at all altitudes, the higher you go, there is lower air pressure, which allows the oxygen molecules to decompress and spread apart. This is what is meant by thin air. At the summit of Mount Everest, the atmospheric pressure is only about a third of that at sea level, meaning that there's only a third of the available oxygen. As a result, your breathing rate increases in an attempt to inhale the necessary oxygen. When exposed to such altitudes gradually, your body begins to acclimatize. It produces additional red blood cells and your heart beats faster to transport them. Non-essential bodily functions are suppressed. The efficiency of food digestion dramatically drops, and eventually your breathing becomes deeper and more infrequent. Acclimatization is non-negotiable if you wish to climb Mount Everest. In 2019 alone, there were 3 deaths directly attributed to altitude sickness. But even if it doesn't result in your death, you may experience one of the following: high-altitude pulmonary edema, where fluid begins to leak into your lungs; high-altitude cerebral edema, where your brain begins to swell as it has insufficient oxygen flow; or high-altitude psychosis, where you may randomly remove pieces of clothing, you may wander off the path, or you might forget to clip yourself into a rope. Sounds terrifying, right? Well, it's even more terrifying when you remember you're likely experiencing this at 8,000 meters or higher, where a rescue is near impossible. Helicopters struggle to generate lift at such high altitudes, so likely wouldn't attempt an airlift unless you was brought down to a lower camp. In fact, the highest helicopter rescue to date was by Maurizio Fellini on May 19, 2013, in a Eurocopter AS350-D3 at an altitude of 7,800 meters. The helicopter hovered as it dropped a long line, which the crew on the ground attached to the harness of the injured climber. He was then flown down to Camp 2, where he was transferred from the long line and into the helicopter to be taken to hospital. A rescue at such heights is certainly an exception, not the rule. And for it to be even remotely possible, the weather needed to be perfect, which, as we're about to discuss, is certainly not guaranteed. Simply put, the weather on Mount Everest is amongst the harshest on Earth, and it has claimed the lives of many climbers. One of its deadliest traits is how cold the temperatures can plummet. In the winter, it can drop to as low as -60 degrees Celsius, but even in climbing seasons, it rarely rises above -20 degrees. Temperatures can be so low that bodily fluids such as tears can freeze. Low temperatures are not the only thing you need to worry about though. Everest can experience hurricane-force winds reaching up to 100 miles per hour. These winds strip away body heat, greatly increasing the chance of frostbite. But it has also previously been known to literally blow climbers off ridges, forcing them to retreat back down the mountain or, sadly, taking their lives. But above all else, what makes Everest weather so perilous is its unpredictability. It's situated close to the jet stream, which is a fast-moving wind current that flows west to east around the Earth at altitudes of 25,000 to 45,000 feet. It means clear skies can transform into a blizzard within hours, catching climbers off guard. A stark example of this occurred in the infamous 1996 Everest disaster, where climbers caught in a sudden storm faced freezing conditions that resulted in severe frostbite, hypothermia, and ultimately 8 people lost their lives. These hostile conditions mean climbers have to time their ascent in weather windows where the jet stream temporarily shifts away, but even then there is no guarantee of safe passage. The weather is one of the main reasons expeditions are abandoned. So now just imagine all of this together: extremely cold temperatures, high speed winds, and low oxygen availability. Yet still, there's one more feature of Everest, which is perhaps the most terrifying. It's avalanches. But before we discuss them, we need to talk about the climb itself. For the sake of this video, let's assume you've made it to Everest Base Camp safely. The arrival at Lukla Airport was smooth, you took a steady hike, acclimatizing at every chance possible, and you've been fortunate enough to have a great weather window for your ascent of Mount Everest. What I'm about to describe is the South Col route, the most popular climbing route. Your journey begins at base camp, situated at an altitude of 5,364 meters. This is referencing the South Base Camp I mentioned earlier. It's essentially a pop-up city where hundreds of people pitch up to spend weeks here acclimatizing. In this time, you will practice climbing, test your gear, and plan your ascent. For every one foreign climber, there are 3 to 4 local workers living in base camp as well, who are either climbing Sherpas working on the mountain or base camp staff such as cooks, dishwashers, and servers. It may surprise you to know that if you have a spare $100,000, there are glamping-esque options to stay in. They provide unlimited electricity through generators, strong reliable Wi-Fi, hot showers, a dedicated barista, and even the world's highest game of ping pong. I mean, just look at this room. It even has a satellite TV. One thing you won't be able to do on that TV though, despite the costs, is watch some of your favourite movies on Netflix, and that's because they're geo-blocked to your home country. But it is possible with the help of Surfshark, the sponsor of today's video. VPNs are vital to keeping you safe online, but one of their most useful features when travelling is the ability to access content from other countries. For some reason, the UK Netflix removes a lot of content which I watch regularly, so it's great knowing that I can switch to any other country to see what movies are on there. Then there's the security aspect of using a VPN. Research shows nearly 2/3 of internet users have experienced a security breach at some point, with a third being in the last year. Using a VPN is like using an online shield, preventing people from accessing your data. Surfshark allows you to block ads, trackers, and malware, all whilst keeping your IP address hidden. Even better than that, and unlike a failed Everest expedition, which can set you back hundreds of thousands of dollars, Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, and if you have any questions, they have a 24/7 customer support service to answer them all. If you want to try out Surfshark for yourself, head to surfshark.com/eeshark, which you'll find a link to at the top of the description to get 4 extra months of Surfshark. But some people may not need a VPN at Everest. For them, this period is the ultimate summer camp where you get to be part of a unique community, bringing people together from all around the world to achieve a common goal. For others though, it's a purgatory where they are constantly reminded of their impending mission. Before climbing, a traditional puja ceremony is carried out. It's officiated by 2 to 3 Buddhist monks, asking the gods for blessing and permission to walk on the mountain. Your ascent begins with one of the most treacherous parts of the whole journey, a chaotic maze of towering seracs, deep crevasses, and unstable snow bridges, which are constantly evolving. This is known as the Kuhumbu Icefall. This time-lapse shows just how much it changes. It moves roughly 1 meter per day. Fortunately for anyone wishing to climb Everest, there are Sherpas who are called Icefall doctors. They plan the safest route at the start of the climbing season. With their ladders, they bridge deep crevasses, and with fixed ropes, they secure the route. As you can see, it's extremely dangerous work. One wrong step can be fatal, so it needs to be operated with extreme caution. It takes approximately 2 to 4 hours to reach Camp 1 from base camp. But if that doesn't seem scary enough, you will ascend and descend between camps multiple times to properly acclimatise, so you will have to navigate the Kuhumbu Icefall more than once before your ascent to the summit. Camp 1 sits at an altitude of 6,065 meters. From here, you enter the Western Cwm. It appears to be a less intimidating part of the climb, as it's a wide flat valley with towering walls of Lhotse and Nuptse either side. These walls reflect sunlight, creating an oven-like effect that can make temperatures surprisingly warm during the day. Combine this with a lack of wind, and it can sap your energy, making it an exhausting slog through the soft snow. Camp 2 is set in a relatively sheltered spot at the upper end of the Western Cwm. Despite your best efforts to acclimatise, you're now at an altitude of 6,400 meters, so headaches might be setting in. Camp 2 is a time to rest, eat and recover while strategizing for the more grueling sections ahead. Next is the Lhotse face, a near vertical wall of ice. Climbers ascend using fixed ropes, kicking crampons into the hard ice for grip. The steep incline offers no reprieve, so energy management is vital for your survival. Camp 3 sits at 7,200 meters, just 800 meters shy of the death zone. It's perched precariously on a narrow ledge of the Lhotse face. This is a critical point for acclimatization. Climbers often make trips between Camp 2 and Camp 3 to adapt to the extreme altitude before advancing. The journey towards Camp 4 takes you across the yellow band and to the left up the Geneva Spur. This is the first time most climbers start to use bottled oxygen, and they start wearing the warm-down suits in anticipation of the cold and heavy winds in Camp 4 and above. Whilst this part may not be as technically difficult, every step feels like a monumental effort. People who have climbed Everest often say that one of the most sobering moments of this route is arriving at the South Col and seeing Camp 4. The Everest pyramid dominates the view, and it's almost impossible to not let your eyes trace the route up to the balcony, up to the southeast ridge, and to the south summit. The col is about the size of a couple of football fields, and there is absolutely nothing up there. Camp 4 is your final stop. You're so close, yet so far away. Your push to the summit will begin around 10 PM at night to make it for sunrise. After multiple hours, you will reach the balcony, situated at an altitude of 8,400 meters. It's a flat area with staggering views, allowing for a brief break. But the oxygen-deprived air and harsh winds force you to carry on. You then reach the south summit. It makes you feel triumphant, but then it reveals the true summit is still ahead. You then have to descend from the south summit and encounter a knife-edge ridge known as the Cornice Traverse. Fortunately for anyone watching this video wishing to climb Mount Everest, a major obstacle between here and the summit no longer exists. In 2015, an earthquake removed the Hilary step, which was a vertical rock face, a major technical step that was sat at 8,790 meters above sea level. But finally, you've made it. You are stood on the roof of the world. The views are unparalleled, and the curvature of the earth is visible on the horizon. The peak of Everest is truly one of the most pure places on earth. However, the feeling of euphoria is quickly substituted with the dread of what's next. You've spent a prolonged period of time in the death zone, being battered by high-speed winds and freezing temperatures. And now you have to do everything we've just discussed in reverse with less energy than you had at the start. And there is one more thing you have to consider: the constant threat of an avalanche. Imagine hearing a distant rumble growing louder. It turns into a thunderous roar, vibrating through the air and shaking the ground beneath your boots. You're about to experience an avalanche on Mount Everest. The air grows colder. It becomes thick with flying air crystals that sting your face and blur your vision. Its sheer force can rip you off your feet. You go from standing in the open to being buried alive in freezing darkness. The snow quickly hardens like concrete, making it impossible to breathe. One of the main issues with avalanches is their unpredictability. They can be triggered by a variety of factors, including, but not limited to, weather changes, heavy snowfall, or the vibrations from climbers' movements. Their sudden onset makes them hard to anticipate. The world was made aware of their true destructive power in 2014. On April the 18th, a massive serac broke off the slopes of Mount Nuptse, triggering an avalanche which swept through the Kuhumbu Icefall. The avalanche struck whilst Sherpas were carrying supplies to higher camps to prepare for the climbing season, and it took 16 of their lives. Shockingly, the Nepali government only paid the family of these Sherpas $400 in compensation. As a result, the 2014 climbing season was effectively cancelled, with many climbers and guides leaving the mountain in solidarity and out of respect for the victims. Just 1 year later, on April the 25th, 2015, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake in Nepal triggered an enormous avalanche that ploughed through Everest Base Camp, It flattened large sections and killed 22 people and injuring many others. Survivors described scenes of chaos as snow and debris swept through, burying tents and climbers in an instant. Avalanches on Everest remain a potent and unpredictable threat, showing that despite advancements in mountaineering, Everest dangers can never truly be tamed. The one constant on Mount Everest since its first summit in 1953 is the key role of the Sherpas, without which summiting Everest wouldn't be possible. And if you want to know why they are quitting, then watch this video on screen now, or click the playlist for many of my other mountain videos similar to this about K2, Annapurna and more.